Welcome to My Accent is No Accident podcast. I am your host, Maritza Perez. We are here today with a woman of a great passion to serve others. Her name, Diana Yañez. Diana is the founder of All the Colors. Her vision is to create culturally aware money systems for women of color entrepreneurs to become a stable and supporting foundation for themselves, their loved ones, and their community. She can fulfill their vision due to over a decade experience with financial industry, her time as a social worker, and now as a coach. She brings these skills and experience specifically to women of color because she knows that financial jargon needs to be translated to the language and priorities that make sense to this underserved community. Diana, it is an honor to have you as a guest on my podcast.
Thank you, Maritza. It's a joy to be here.
So, Diana, I am amazed at everything that you do and how you help the community and women of different colors. I love it. So I'm gonna start with a question. Tell me, Diana, what is your accent and why is not an accident?
Okay. So I grew up on the border with Mexico and the US, in a little town called Calexico. I joke that my parents literally immigrated 10 feet north, 10 meters north, because it's literally on the border. And my first language is Spanish, Español, and I learned English when I was 8 years old. And funny enough, if you learn a language you are 12, you actually don't have an accent because your brain is just so malleable. But I also speak French, and in French I do have an accent because I learned it when I was 16.
Yes, that's true. You don't have my daughter was born here, but we always spoke to her in Spanish in the beginning, and then later it was the same. She doesn't have an accent, but she does have an accent in Spanish a little bit. Now she's growing a little better. So you speak Spanish, English, and French.
Yes.
I love that. So tell me a little bit about how did you start with your business?
Yeah, so I first came into financial services when I was in college, and I did not think it was for me. I really did not enjoy it at all. It felt like I was a glorified car salesman. Like, honestly, it was just like asset gathering. The firm where I worked at, it was not a fit. But I love money. I love talking about it. I love how interesting and complex it is. I love how scared people can be around money. Like, I love making it easier for them. And I see so much stress and anxiety in that area of life. I initially really started out of I was reading books about it. I was trying to figure out my personal finances. And I read a book called 7 Stages of Money Maturity. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And this book introduced me to a different way of doing money services, right? It was much more about getting clear on your values and how your money could reflect those values. And yeah.
That is awesome. So I love this. I love how, and this is how you approach your services and the way you help women, in particular women of color.
Definitely. It's getting clear on the thing that you want and then figuring out what steps you need to take to get there. And it's also understanding what are all of the unconscious stories that you might be carrying that are holding you back, right? And I can talk specifically about like why I work with women of color. So as women in the US, we didn't have access to credit cards in our own name until 1974, right?
Yes.
That's not very long ago. That's 50 years ago, a couple of generations ago. It meant that we were not able to have our own car, our own home. We had to do it in conjunction with a husband or a brother or a father, right?
Oh, wow.
So
That
there's the oppression that exists for women. And then when you think about the people of color oppression, oh, and actually, let me go a little further on the thing for women. There's what's called the pink tax. When a woman walks into a car sales place, right, anywhere where she might buy something on credit, research shows that she'll be surcharged an extra 2% of interest.
oh wow. And how they count?
How do they do that? They look at everyone, right? They do a randomized survey of like all of the people that come in, and they look at who the genders are. Like, was it women? Was it men? Was it they, them, non-binary? And they look at the interest rate on average that is given to them. They look at whether people have the same income, and there's that interest differential, whether people have the same amount of assets. So if you control for everything, women are still charged an extra 2%. And people of color, it's even higher,
Oh
right?
wow, that is interesting.
It's heartbreaking.
And it's heartbreaking.
There's very real discrimination out there.
Yes, it is very, very heartbreaking. I mean, just because you're a woman, then doesn't mean that you have to pay more. And then women usually don't get more money.
They earn
Don't get
less.
paid.
Women
Yes,
earn less.
yes. And although lately it it's starting to go out more the like inequality or inequity, but we are having to fight these facts. I also was part of these where people that were doing the same thing that I was doing were making 10,000 more than I was making. And I was working harder than them. So it is heartbreaking. So you're helping these women. Are you helping them around the world or only in US?
Currently, I have clients in the US and Canada. For money coaching, I really can do it worldwide. I don't know, I only know the US system though. So to give you like really concrete
Yes.
advice on investments and all of that, I'm limited to the US.
And which is okay, but you are also helping them figure out how to take care of their debt, how to get out of debt, and these other things that help them have financial free of that life, correct?
Figuring out financial freedom because it's one thing, it's good for us to know the structural systems that are against us so that we don't think like, oh, I'm sure they're being fair, right? So that we stand up and really ask for what we want, that we really are very thoughtful in how we go about making that a reality. And I mean, I meet people where they're at as a coach. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. I'm a certified financial planner, which means I went to school. I took like 6 graduate level degrees. I passed an exam that only like half the people pass. I worked under somebody else for 2 years. Every year I take an ethics course. So that's what it means to be a certified financial planner. I'm also a registered life, which is the equivalent of a life coach for financial planners. And I went through the compassionate inquiry training, which gave me an ability to work with like trauma, right? For my work to be more trauma informed. When I work with people, it's very, very customized. It's very much like, what are your goals today? How can I help you get them? I always remind people I'm an expert in money, but you're an expert in your life,
Mhm.
right? So at the end of the day, it's like, what are your goals?
Oh, that is so important. And are these women in any specific, I will say, background, or you're specifically any women of color?
I specialize in women of color entrepreneurs, but I can serve anyone, right? We're all people. We all work in the
Yeah.
same system. And it's been a lot of women of color entrepreneurs that have come my way because as entrepreneurs, you're very confronted by your money.
Yes. And then you also help couples, correct?
Yes, I love working with couples because it's usually like they're kind of like frozen. It's kind of, what is it, deer in the headlights look. I really don't want to talk about my with my partner about money, but all I can do is fight. and helping them navigate that is like super interesting work for me. And it also is, I don't know, it feels really good to help them get to a place where they're talking well, where they're happy with each other and their money.
And then I was reading your programs, and then you have one that is your money in full bloom. Can you explain a little bit of that?
Yeah, so Money in Full Bloom is this graphic you can find on my website, and it really has three layers. The bottom layer, and it's, so let me describe the image. It's this beautiful tree that's blooming, or that's like full of leaves. It's super luscious. And on the bottom, you can see the roots, and the roots are like thick and grounded, and the soil looks really lush. You've got the sun cascading through the tree so that you can see the shadows and the branches and like the fullness of it. So it's a tree in full bloom. Like this is the tree that you're like, oh my God, grandfather tree, let me sit next to you and like hear your life story. Because it's so impressive. It's a beautiful photo. And what I overlaid on top of it is it's three layers. The bottom I call nourished soil. And the nourished soil is like having open conversations, right? Being able to like, if you're at a car salesman, it's asking them, okay, so this is my interest rate. Can you verify that how does my interest rate compare to men who have a similar income compared to white people who have a similar income? So it's asking them to go and do some research so that their implicit bias doesn't hurt you. Because it's not so much that someone is doing this to you, it's not personal that there's a racist system. There's just a racist system,
Yes.
right?
Oh,
So
wow.
having the capacity to have those open money conversations is part of your soil. It's on your money history. If you grew up in a home where sometimes there was money and sometimes there wasn't, that can create a lot of scarcity wounds. That can create a lot of trauma of like, as soon as I have money, I spend money because I don't know when it's going to come back,
Yes.
right? So being aware of that mindset is part of your nourished soil, right?
Yes. Oh, wow. I love that.
And I have a very compassionate and gentle approach because money is already hard. Like I don't need to make it harder for people. When you sense in you that you have a system that's actually hurting you, a routine, a paradigm that's hurting you, be very, very gentle and curious and ask, what is this helping me? How is this fulfilling a need? That's what it means to be trauma informed. It means that, okay, fine, maybe I'm doing this that actually hurts me. Like every time I get paid, I spend it all the next day, right? Like, why are you doing it? Maybe it's protecting you from losing it in some way.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Wow. And so what is the focus on this program? The idea is to give them like planning of a financial planning for.
Your money in full bloom is how I teach. It's how I teach money. I teach money either as one-on-one or couples or group. My group coaching program is called Bosque Money. And Bosque Money is a 6-month coaching program. And through that, we actually go through all three layers of your money in full bloom. And I'll talk about the technical aspects, insurance, estate, taxes, figuring out your W-2 income. If you're self-employed, it's figuring out like how do you manage that the sporadic income that it's like some months you have income, some months you don't. How do you manage that? And I also focus again a lot on figuring out what your nourished soil is. What's your money history? What's your money archetype? I teach this archetype class where I divide people into 5 different categories. And we look at the gifts and challenges of each type. And knowing that actually helps people be like, oh, I don't have to judge myself for doing this. This is just the kind of thing that I do. It's kind of like knowing your money horoscope, you know?
Yeah.
And then figuring out how do you take advantage of the gifts and minimize the challenges of it, or what is it that you need to set up in order for you not to fall into that challenge trap, whatever it is for your money archetype, because they all have challenges. So that's in Bosque Money, we meet every week for the first 4 weeks or the first month, and then we meet once a month. because I work a lot with people on behavioral change, right?
Very important that.
And the easiest way to change behavior is to join a group of people who are doing the thing that you want to do. When we're changing behavior, it can be very isolating. We can feel really lonely if we start to do things differently and our partner doesn't understand, our friends don't understand, and we don't understand, you know? It's kind of like, why am I dieting? Why am I saving money? No one else is, you know, but hay que vivir para el hoy, mañana no existe. That's like some of the
Yes,
mentality that we have as Latinos. Um, So in this group coaching, as people are experimenting into a way of being with money that's more joyful for them, because I mean, people come because their money is not going well, right? And they're trying to figure out, like, how do I do money in a way where I'm not stressed out all the time, where I'm not losing sleep, where I'm not fighting with my partner. In this 6-month program, we really experiment into what makes sense for each person. Again, I'm an expert on money, but I'm not an expert on you. You are the only expert on you. I'm not going to be with you every time you swipe that credit card. Instead, I want to teach people how to know when to swipe the credit card, when to pay in cash, and when to say, I actually don't want that.
Oh, that is super important. So I'm gonna ask you something because you mentioned Latinos, and then there is one thing that we all Latinos do, and is ah, let's do it and let's spend and we'll pay later. We'll figure it out later. How does that affect really the family? The family.
It is really, I mean, it's tough because I'm a financial planner and my dad makes fun of me for saving for retirement. Like he's like, ¿para qué guardas tanto? ¿Y qué tal si te mueres? No, he's worried. Like, what if I die before I retire? What's gonna happen to all that money? And I'm like,
Yeah.
it'll go to my brother. It's fine. and and there's something beautiful about knowing how to enjoy your money today. The place where it hurts us is when we do have an emergency and we have no way of providing for it. And it's one of those like things we have to learn how to balance because in our culture, in my experience as a Mexican, I know that my family is always going to be there for me and that I'm always going to be there for them. So there is this like why save when I know my community will take care of me. Problem is that it's not always possible, right? So my grandparents were able to live on a pension. My parents, that's not going to be enough for them,
Yes.
right? And whereas before maybe it was possible for the children to take care of the parents, it becomes more difficult in our extremely capitalist system in the US where it's so extractive, where salaries, where wages are not keeping up with inflation and the cost of goods. If we still lived like we did 100 years ago, 200 years ago on a farm, then maybe it would make sense not to save for tomorrow because your family would take care of it. But things have changed and we need to be able to change with it.
Yes. And that is so true, especially because right now our generation, it's so like especially here in US and many other countries, we don't know if we're gonna get a governmental retirement plan. So you
Mhm.
need to plan for the time when you are not gonna be able to have a full-time income and because you're not going to work until you're 100, and it's probably one of the things that Latinos have is like, I'm going to just going to work my whole life, and you're like, as soon as your body allows you to.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
to your point, these emergencies can be not only your emergency as you getting sick or something, but it can be your car broke down, you had an accident, um, a hurricane or anything, a storm. You need to have money saved to be able to cushion those things that happen um, at like no inesperados, like
Mhm.
without
Unexpected.
expectations. Um, so it is super important and you are right. Many communities, and especially the color communities, do not have these. It's work, 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 work. And and globally, I think that that is one of the problems that we have seen.
And we have to just feel compassionate with ourselves again about how recent this is. It's only a few generations old. Like the 401k, the Roth IRAs, those also started in the 70s. Before that, companies provided pensions, Social Security was available, and also like Social Security, when it started in the 30s, in the 1930s, it paid out at 65. Life expectancy was 62.
Oh my God.
So honestly, the plan was that people would die before they got Social Security.
Yes.
Now life expectancy is in the 80s,
Oh
right?
wow.
Things have really changed,
Yeah.
and we need to consider like what is your planning for when you stop working? And maybe you don't. I know my dad is self-employed and he does not want to stop working because he likes it. He's a contractor. He likes making the phone calls. His need to work to lower, right? He wants to be, so he bought a house and he subrents it and he has like these other things that like passive income. He's kind of planning it out, even though he's in his mid 60s. And it's taken a change of mindset of that like me and my brother are not going to be able to support him the way that he was able to support his parents. It's the same thing for my mom. So it's having those open money conversations with your family and saying what's actually possible. A lot of the times, like the sandwich generation where they're taking care of children, it can be really, really stressful. Having the open money conversations and also like asking parents, like, what was it like for your parents? What was it like for your parents when they were taking care of their parents? You know, what have been the family expectations? And maybe sometimes we need to grieve for that. You know,
Oh,
sometimes there's a little bit of sadness of like, wow, I'm not going to be able to do what you did for my grandparents. And
yeah.
sometimes there's a lot of joy that like I'm going to be able to do more than what you did. You know, like it just be aware of it. Like let the thing come out into the open.
Yes. And then another thing that I it caught my attention because I am an entrepreneur. And sometimes when you're an entrepreneur and you are or a solopreneur in many cases, you don't have a consistent income. And that is something that you also help people with, how to manage your life with inconsistent income. Can you tell us a little bit of that?
Definitely. I mean, I can tell you the secret. You got to be like a saguaro. Uh, so if you know saguaros in northern Mexico, there's these giant cactus, giant cacti trees. And in the desert, when it rains, it floods. And when it doesn't rain, it's a drought, right? It does not rain at all for months when it's going to rain again. As entrepreneurs at the beginning, or depending on what kind of business you have that cycle. Rain, drought, flood, drought, flood, drought. That's very, very different from when you're an employee and you have an equal amount of income coming in all the time, right?
Yeah.
What I have people create is a fictional equal income all the time.
Okay.
Okay. So when a saguaro is growing, it sets really, really deep roots before it starts to sprout up. As entrepreneurs, as much as you can, stock away money so that you can cover months of business expenses and 6 months of personal salary.
Oh wow.
Yeah. You need to have cash on hand. You need to have reserves on hand in order to move through those droughts.
Yes.
Sometimes that means you need to borrow in order to start the business. Sometimes that means you need to have a side job. You need to figure out a way where you can have consistent income because you have consistent expenses like food and shelter.
Yes. And you have to pay your bills no matter what.
You have to pay your bills. Yeah. What if your incomes don't know when the income's coming at all? Like that's why when people are considering entrepreneurship, really the recommendation is get a pile of cash and then sit on it. Don't immediately invest it into your business. There are people who finance their business with debt. Just know that every time you borrow, you have to pay for the privilege of borrowing.
Okay.
Right?
And then how is that? Is that because there is a bigger percentage APR, or I think that
Yeah, you're paying interest. You're paying interest. Every time you borrow, you have to pay interest. You have to pay for the privilege of someone else's money. Um, so consider your startup cost. If you're starting with debt, then understand that you're going to need to have that minimum payment is going to be part of your business expenses,
yes, of your overhead, you have to
of your
count the
overhead.
overhead.
Mhm.
Yes. So starting a business, um, it is not easy. It is super exciting, but it is also a responsibility to keep yourself and your family safe. So when would you recommend to say, okay, I think you need to find an extra way to have an income because this is drowning you?
That's a hard question, because it depends. I tend to be more conservative. Most financial planners are pretty conservative, that we don't want to take on more debt that we can serve or take on more expenses that we can serve. Other people are more comfortable with risk, so they may feel like, you know what, I can still figure this out. I think it's different for each person. Consider how you're sleeping.
Yes.
Consider how you're interacting with your family. If you're really stressed out about money, then give yourself a break and find another income source while your business gets to the point where it needs to be in order to provide for you.
It is very important, you're right, to honor yourself and make sure that you value your time, your family, and your commitments, because it is important to know that you come first and then your family, like you were saying. If you are burning out, just make sure that you talk to your family members. So you are talking about honoring the family commitments. How do you approach that with your clients?
Right. When it comes to money and family, it can be complicated, right? Especially when we're immigrants. I remember one of my mentors, her name is Valeria Loe, and she wrote a book called Uncolonized Latinas. And she talks about how, as immigrants, we come to the US and we want people to know that our effort was worth it. So sometimes we can be very flashy and showy, right? We want to spend so that people know, like, hey, all of this was worth it, or this is why I came here to have these things. And at the same time, if we're also providing that for our family back in a different country, or if we're providing that for our family that came with us and is getting established, it's like, how do we manage both assisting them and also covering our own expenses?
Wow, yes. So it is very important also to recognize, and I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, to recognize that many of us that are immigrants, no matter where we come from, are not only providing to the immediate family that is living with us, but we are also helping our families in our countries,
Mhm.
whether they are our parents or any other family member. Um, yes, please continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So when we're contributing, I think it's always really important for us to have our own personal budget, our own personal spending plan, cash flow plan in order, to be really aware of, like, what do I need to survive? And then from that point, share with others, either with our family back in the home in the different country or with our family locally. It's like when you're in an airplane, right? You got to put the air mask on first before you put it on somebody else. And sometimes it can be really hard because I think of, like, oh my gosh, $50 in the US is nothing, but it's so much in Mexico. Maybe not in Mexico, but in Colombia, el
In
peso
Colombia,
colombiano, the Colombian peso, it's really devalued compared to the US dollar.
yes, and especially right now with all the situation that we're having in the government and stuff.
Mhm.
So it is, yes. And sometimes depending in the cities that you go to or the people live, things are very expensive. Um, and talking about other countries, you are also committed to yourself and to travel the world. And you go around, like right now you're not here in US. Where are you right now?
I'm in Medellin, Colombia. I'm in your corner of the world.
So you travel around, and did you consider yourself a digital nomad? Tell me a little bit of how you manage that with your work and with your business and clients and life.
Yeah, so I started traveling July of 2021, and right now it's May of 2023. So I'm almost at 2 years of traveling. I let go of my apartment. I used to live in Philadelphia, but I arrived in Mexico City and I thought, I love this. I love this. I don't want to go back. And ever since, I've been a slow traveler. Like I'll spend 4 months in one country and one city, and then I'll move back home for a couple of months. I went back to Philadelphia a couple of times. I often travel for conferences to give presentations. And I manage it in the way that I think, okay, between when I have to be in the US, either for a presentation or a family commitment, I have, like, for example, right now I have 10 weeks in Latin America. What can I do in 10 weeks? I'm also an entrepreneur and I work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5,
Yes.
right? So I'm not, I know some digital nomads that work 15 hours a week, but I work 40, which means that I move a lot slower. I've had some of my best experiences traveling though. The people that I meet, all of us are kind of like, you want to do something, you do it. It's very much like whatever your heart's desire, like you go for it. So very, very adventurous people who don't see limits, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
entrepreneurs who do this digital nomad. And some of the hard parts of it though are that I miss meal planning. I miss meal prepping. I'm often at Airbnbs that don't have all of the Tupperware I need. I don't have like my crock pot. I don't have all of my spices. I'm at that point where in July I'm going to establish myself in Mexico City and actually live there. Because the joy of being a digital nomad, I've used it up. I'm ready to have like go back to the gym and have plants and a pet. Um, and on the upside though, I have seen so many gorgeous beaches. I have met such cool people. I have such great travel stories. Um, it's like every weekend I get to explore a different part of the world, you know?
Exactly. And then that is the idea of my podcast. Like, we are all different. Everybody in anywhere in the world, we are all different. We have different cultures, different religions, different accents, things that make us ourselves who we are. Your internal person and your personality and the things that you do and the things that you like are so much different than others, and we have to highlight those differences and celebrate them instead of discriminate them. Women, like you said, in the 1970s were not considered good for society. Like, they were not considered to be able to work or be a CEO of a company. Maybe they were secretaries or lower, support roles, but they never considered a woman working in a construction company, or never considered a woman working in a bank or as a CEO. Today we are living in a different world where we are starting to be a little more recognized that we also have skills and differences. And I love to meet people like you that are able to highlight those things for others and help them grow. And what a beautiful you do, helping women of color and women in particular, and also couples and many other people that need a little bit of help on having that financial setup in their mind and their household and their companies so that they can have a freedom and be able to not spend the money like crazy, but be able to have a free life where they can do what they like and what they enjoy. Do you want to say something else? Actually, how can people contact you?
Yeah, definitely. You come to my website. It's allthecolors.net. I offer free, I call them heart-centered money calls. So you can come and talk with me for 30 minutes around what's keeping you awake with money, like what is it with money, or what are your dreams with money, right? I love to share my technical expertise with people, but also like my lived experience of having walked hundreds of clients through their money questions. Come and have a conversation with me. I'm always open for it. I offer private, either individual or couples coaching, and my next group coaching is going to start in the fall of 2023. So that's when I start the next group coaching.
Excellent. So everybody, go ahead and contact Diana and go to her website, allcolors.net, and hurry up, sign up for fall because there are not many people that can be in that program. So hurry up, sign up. Thank you
Yes,
so
that's
much.
right. It's only limited to 12 people.
Oh, imagine that. Hurry up, I'm gonna sign up. I am thrilled to have you here, and I would love to have you back and talk about all the other things that we were not able to finish talking today. Our time is up, but what a pleasure to have a fellow Latina helping the world, women, get a better understanding of the finances as entrepreneurs and as mothers. And I want to again tell my audience, if you are in this world, it's because you're loved. No matter the circumstances that brought you to this world, it's because a greater force and power brought you to it. And you are here because you were loved. See you next time. Bye.
Hi, it's Maritza here. If you like this episode of My Accent is No Accident podcast and would like to listen more like this, subscribe wherever you're listening to it or watching it. Leave us a nice review and share with your friends, family, and network. Thanks for listening.